New Gods of Remnant by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 9, Reasons to Rule. Heavy is the crown. Reasons to rule. Merlot! That name echoed through the silence like a curse. You stand accused of gross crimes against humanity. How do you plead? Silence reigned, blue eyes narrowed against it. Speak up, or you will be spoken for. Naruto watched the accused squirm on the podium below the throne and bit back a sigh. He took a moment to consider his surroundings, idly wondering how he found himself here. No one was immune to the ravages of time, and make no mistake, time had passed. Ruling had seemed so very simple in the beginning. Be good, be kind, and be above all. And above all, be fair. Passing judgment on the citizens of Bell seemed anything but at times. He supposed the same could be said for his surroundings. This was just too much for his taste. Truly, the council chamber was a marvel of engineering, one built long before he'd set foot in the city, notable for its high vaulted ceiling and multiple sprawling floors. It was certainly something to behold. Atop it sat a pair of thrones, which he and Maria currently occupied, while on a level below 9 chairs awaited, only 2 of which were filled for today's ruling. Dean Winchester caught him staring and offered a curt nod. Noelle Valkyrie waved cheerily, one hand resting on the half of her axe. Well, at least those two were behaving. He gutted the council of Vel and replaced it with those he trusted, both by merit as well as those that reported directly to him. Folk who knew their jobs inside and out. It had proved surprisingly cathartic. Their little group was doing good for the city of Vel, Mount Glen, and beyond. Reform was up, crime was down. Long live the god of light reborn, long may he reign, and that sort of thing. Below them stood a podium where the guilty, or in this case Merlot, were judged, and below that a space for spectators to observe. Naruto wasn't much fond of that last bit. Guilt was guilt, justice was justice, something to be dispensed and done with. This shouldn't be a spectator sport for people to preen and paw at. Then again, today was anything but ordinary. Today, justice was due, swift, bloody justice. For today was the anniversary of Mount Glen. Could be worse, Kurama offered. At least you don't have a cult. The whole bloody city acts like one. I stand corrected. Merlot's infuriating silence persisted for a moment more, and then, not guilty, and that's Dr. Merlot to you, filthy plebeian. The condemned in wrath and raved where he stood, chained at the podium. I killed a lot of people to get this title, and I will be addressed properly. A foam flecked at his bearded visage. Properly? Just Merlot then? Stupid wench, you wouldn't know brilliance if it kicked you in the... A guard cuffed him across the face, cutting him short. Nobody cares. Maria swung the javelin down with a resounding thwack to silence another outburst. Talk back like that again, and we'll have your tongue plucked out. Do I make myself clear? To his credit, the mad scientist seemed to realize the threat behind the words, if only because he looked fit to climb down the dais and strangle him herself. Naruto didn't much blame her. He was feeling rather cross himself right now. It had taken a terrible long time to track the madman down, but here they were, having it out before the people of Vale. He was bit the madman. People pegged him as. He was the bit the madman pegged him as. Calling a shinobi a god was an annoyance, to be sure, but what kind of madman worked with the Grim? Really, there was no point in even arguing this. The evidence against Merlot was ironclad, but pointless posturing had kept them here much of the day. No longer. Maria caught his eye and reached over to thread her fingers with his. Lunch. Naruto gave her a hand and a squeeze. In a minute. Let's wrap this up. He raised a hand, and the murmurs below him stilled. Look, all this debate is getting us nowhere, Dr. Merlot. The fool preened a little at the use of his title. Do you stand accused of letting the horde into Mount Glen on 1 year ago? Naruto recoiled upon his throne and planted his chin against one hand. Do you deny it? The doctor lifted his chin. I do not. Maria nearly burst to her feet. Naruto reeled the young woman back before she could. And yet you claim to be innocent. Why? Because I am. Tell me, is it murder when you shear the sheep? The mad doctor's words took on an edge. No, Is it murder when you slaughter the pig for a feast? I think not. Is it murder when you put a dying beast out of its misery? No, I did what was necessary. He leaned forward against the podium as far as his chin would allow. Bell has an overpopulation problem, Your Grace, one not even Mount Glen can solve. By releasing those wonderful beasts into the glen, I aimed to solve that problem. Then he dared to bow. I was doing your will, most holy one. Kurma went curiously still. What? Nausea rolled in Naruto's stomach. Come again. Merlot preened in his chains. Actually preened, the mad bastard. There was no need to ask. The quack actually looked proud of himself. I know what you willed. My experiment may have been a failure, but it was not without, and in time I will discover so much more. A wild, feverish light burned in the lunatic's good eye. The Grim are the perfect vessels. In time I could make them soldiers, make them serve us, serve you. A seed of anger stirred in the shinobi's chest. He quashed it. Calm. He had to remain calm. Don't snap. Don't tear his head off, no matter how tempting it might be. And how many lives will you throw away for the sake of that dream? As many as necessary. The scientist shrugged. There can be no progress without sacrifices. Surely your holiness understands this. A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw. Even from here, he could sense the man's emotions. Berlot felt no guilt for what he'd done, only twisted pride. Worse, he could feel the fear from the crowd now. They were looking at him with not quite fear, but trepidation all the same. Noelle was stiff as a board in her seat, eyes gone glassy with some awful memory. Winchester had all but burst to his feet. Maria bled anger with a broken sieve. He denied it. With every fiber of his being, he denied it. You're not a good man, Merlot. You let people die just to fuel your own twisted schemes. There's no redeeming you. Now to open his hand, winced but a little when Maria slammed the gavel into his palm and brought it crashing down on the armrest of his throne. I hereby sentence you to death. Any objection? Merlot quailed. You cannot, can, am, have. He turned his head. Noelle, do your duty. The executioner rose with a languished smile and brandished her weapon. Happily. Your Majesty, a lone voice, his lawyer, called out amongst the stillness. This is madness. His research. Think of the things we could yet learn from him. Who was he again? Some bald fellow in a black suit. Probably not important. He's spoken. The matter is closed. Winchester sank back into his seat, the tension bleeding from his shoulders. Besides, what's to learn? Grim die when you kill them. Is it as it should be? Exactly. Naruto tilted his head, drew himself up, and put on his game face. I think it's perfectly sane. This man here, he gestured a hand to the lunatic even now glaring at them, is accused of letting Grim into Mount Glen. People died because of him. Would you spit on their sacrifice? The man looked away. Of course not, Your Grace. I don't care if he pleads guilty, innocent, or insane. He slashed the hand out. He dies, but due process has no recourse. He has no recourse here. Winchester chimed in with a low growl. He was seen letting those beasts into the glen. We have eyewitnesses' testimony and video footage of his crimes. Besides, Noelle was nearly down the days now, her eyes gleaming fiercely. Either you stand aside and let the people justice be done, or you join him. Faced with the very real possibility of perishing himself, the man backed away. Maria rolled her eyes. Will someone kill this fool already? Noelle beamed. Don't have to tell me twice. In his final moments, Merlot tried to speak. I will not die here. I cannot. Her axe flashed out in a gleaming silver arc, turning his words to a rasping gurgle. Red splashed across the floor. His heedless corpse slumped against the chains that bounded him, never to raise again. Noelle swept her mighty weapon to the weapon wide, bandaged the blood from its edge. A churlish smile favored the crowd below, none of whom dared to speak. In a single seamless movement, she reached down and plucked his severed skull from the ground, revealing his fearful face, jaw still agape in one final scream. Behold the head of a traitor! A cry went up among them, not one of fear or of loathing, but glee. Naruto considered the spectacle with a sigh. He didn't like the idea of executing people, but there could be no denying Merlot was beyond the pale. What he had said, people doing things in his name and claiming they were his will. He didn't like the idea. No, he loathed it. Was this what it meant to be worshipped? He didn't think it was possible to hate his new position any more than he already did. Just thinking about it unnerved him. Would my lord be the first of many? He hoped not. If lunatics were going to run around committing atrocities in his name, no, something would have to be done about this. But what? How did you convince people to listen to you when you claimed you weren't a god? They weren't listening to them. They weren't listening to them even now. Worry about that later. You've done enough for one day. Maria reached across her throne and touched a hand to his again. Her silver eyes reflected the same concern he felt. Whatever came next, they could face it together as they had everything else. Court adjourned, people. Dean banished the crowd with a wave. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, now that we've tended to that. Maria sighed as the doors closed behind them. What's next on the agenda? Well, Noelle adjusted her spectacles, where she'd gotten them from, where he'd never known, as she pulled out a clipboard. Let's see here. Winchester whistled. Damn, that's a good look. Hey, you two can flirt on your own time. The duo sputtered. Right, first you have a speech welcoming the new initiates to begin. Noelle poked a finger at Maria. The lunch with the council. She jerked a thumb at her chest. In other words, me, Dean, and that Varney fellow visiting dignitaries from Atlas, followed by playtime with the girls. Nato quirked a brow. How did that last bit get in there? Maria laughed. Really now, you're asking that? I'm just saying, that seems a bit random. The other brow rose. All right. He raised his hands in surrender. We've been busy these last few weeks. Suppose a little time off wouldn't kill us. Months, actually, Maria chimed. Has it been that long? Time really had flown these days. Sometimes he wondered why he'd agreed to this job again. The doors to the council chamber slammed open. Then came the horde. Daddy, Father! Naruto barely had a chance to blink before young Summer dove on him. Talk was only a step behind, and together they nearly sent him sprawling to the floor. Only Glinda proved more reserved in her approach, but her displeased frown told him she wished otherwise. So he reached out and grabbed her too, despite her protest. Right, the blonde laughed. That's why. All right, girls. He planted one fist on his hip. What happened this time? Or rather, what did you do? Glinda slapped a newspaper at him. You're on the front page. The wayward blinked. No, that's not important. Summer pulled past the paper before he could glimpse the headline. Talk cheated in training again. Did she now? The crocodile fawness blanched. Did not. Did too. We said no semblances. You used yours. Nata listened to them as they babbled about some trivial dispute they had, and naturally he had to mediate everything once again. Truly, he couldn't help but smile as Maria was drawn in, followed by an exasperated Dean and a bemused Noelle. If this was to be his life for a while, well, maybe it wouldn't be quite so bad. But why did he feel like he was forgetting something? It's time. Salem opened her eyes and stirred from her meditation. She'd counted the days one after the other. She could wait no longer. In hindsight, perhaps it was foolish of her to simply cease her schemes and train. One could hardly blame her for taking the time to prepare herself for the coming conflict. But in that same vein, you could only prepare the mind and body so much. But she'd been so impatient, and that persisted thorn of a thought had persisted. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if he had some schemes ready for her? But now she was ready. Now she knew. Now she was prepared for him and his words, his silver tongue. Long had she waited for this moment. Her plans on hold, her pawns restless as she awaited the destined time. And now it was here. Pale fingers clicked in a sharp snap, creating a fresh grin from the pool below her. It didn't so much rise as it did thrash its way into existence. Life taking form from dark waters. A small shape formed, sprouted feathers and a mask. On a whim, she gave the creature more intelligence than most, if only to ensure it did not falter in its assignment. She held out an arm, and the newborn Nevermore alighted upon her outstretched limb. Blazing red eyes bore into it. Do not rest until you've completed your task. Deliver this to him. 5 minutes later, a Nevermore wheeled out the window and arrowed towards Vel with a parcel clutched in its talons. In the world, well, the world changed just a little more. That what's a talk show? Kakashi Hatake did his utmost not to smile in the face of Cinder's innocent inquiry as he straightened his tie backstage. Really, he did. He gave it his best shot. Naturally, he failed. That went without saying. One did not simply refuse Cinder when she made that face. Even nearly a year on, she was still an adorable little thing. When she was angry, for all her fire and fury, she was still very much a child, no matter how hard she tried to make others think otherwise. It's complicated. She wrinkled her nose at him. Well, make it uncomplicated. He supposed he could, but where was the fun in that? A single parent had to take what little pleasure they could in this day and age. I suppose I could, but it's better if you see it for yourself. He gave her a nudge between the shoulders. Go sit with Willow and Nicholas. This won't take long. Wait, I know that look. Fiery amber orbs narrowed. You're being a troll again, aren't you? You're up to something. Oh, he crooked a silver brow at her. Figured out that yourself, did you? She stuck out her tongue and scampered off. Silly girl. His task completed, the masked shinobi turned back to the curtain. A guard slipped through, saw him, and promptly saluted him. They're ready for you, sir. Good lad, he only stuttered a little. It's been an honor. Thank you, Corporal. At ease. With a nod and a smile, he slipped past, and as he walked, he allowed his mind to wander. He'd done a bit of training in the interim. Really, he had to thank Guy for introducing him to the idea of the eight gates. Time had been he'd only been capable of opening a single one under duress. No longer. Three might seem an inadequate number to some, but for anyone to come this far in such a short time, well, it was nothing short of miraculous. Perhaps it had something to do with the innate nature of this world. Chakras came easy to him here. The fact that he still had both Obito's eyes, something that ought to have been temporarily at least, only served as further proof. People tended to shy away when he activated them. Many were still afraid of him after what he'd done, and if chakra came easily to him, well, he suspected Naruto and the rest were learning that lesson themselves, but now wasn't the time for such thoughts. He paused before a door and took a deep breath. All right, he checked his vest one last time to be certain he was prepared. Time for revolution. With a nudge, wary shinobi forced it open. A voice trickled through to him on the other side as he walked. With great power comes great responsibility. He heard the woman's words loud and clear as she spoke to her audience. And gods, well, they have the greatest responsibility of all. A smile touched at his face beneath the mask as he crept closer. It falls to them to lead you, see, not just by word and deed, but example. Let me put things in perspective. Some say these four are deities. The brothers can come back to Remnant to lead us into a golden age. Whatever they are, they're clearly more than common folk. Hatake tittered softly. A sweetheart, you have no idea. Oh, sweetheart, you have no idea. He paused before another curtain, waiting for his moment. Whoever she was, this woman was quite the orator. What was her name again? He could have sworn she was someone important, but for the life of him, he just couldn't recall it. Blast! It was on the tip of his tongue. Then why are there four of them? Her voice rose, picking with eagerness. Some say one represents creation, the other destruction, another knowledge, and the fourth choice, and we have Atlas hold the most powerful of them all, do we not? Aha! He remembered now. Cordovan, that was the young woman's name. Well, here he is, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome Kakashi Hatake to our show. The audience applauded politely as he glided across the stage and slipped into a seat beside the speaker. Thanks for having me, but really, I'm not a god. May as well pander to the narrative as have a bit of fun with it. I'm more of a devil, really. I just counsel them. Someone was tapping at his window. Someone or something. Tap, tap, tap. Naruto heard it at once. His keen senses would allow nothing less. Didn't make him happy about it, however. He tried to ignore it. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. When it didn't cease after nearly a full minute, he felt Maria stir against him in bed. He shushed her and stood reluctantly, stumbling as he squinted against the light of the ruined moon. Still, the noise persisted. Tap, tap, tap. And the world better be ending. He creaked an eye open with a growl, or it will be once I'm through with you. Tap tap tap. He flung the window open and paced out onto the balcony. Oh, a foul feathered fowl awaited him without a perched just below the railing. Poor thing looked absolutely exhausted. He stifled a jaw-popping yawn with the back of his hand. Don't suppose you're going to make a fuss or anything? The tired little avian uttered a wary call. He considered it for a moment. Maybe I'll keep you. Always wanted to try and tame a crow. The messenger never more seemed to regain a bit of life at that, because it arched its neck and shot him a nasty call. All right, all right. He laughed. He laughed to spite his own anxiety. You're not a crow. His hand stroked its head. You're a big bad raven. Yes, you are. It preened a bit. Was it really that easy? Just show it a bit of affection, and it was all but eaten out of his hand. Then he noticed the parcel it carried. One of those things again. Naruto did his best not to sigh as he unbound a small portable seer from the bird's back. From there he lifted it in his hands to give it the full weight of his regard. For all intensive purposes, it appeared to be inert, dead and cold in his grasp. Why would Salem send him one of these? Yow! A strangle his tore past a strangle tore past his lips as the silent creature burned burned white hot in his grasp. He dropped it to the floor with a hiss. Its circular face struck the stone, and an ugly fracture etched itself across the creature's smooth surface. Then another followed by a second, a third, now a fourth. In nearly no time at all, 9 separate cracks scrawled across in its firmly face. The creature's tentacles shriveled up like wheat in blazing heat. He knew this. He'd seen it once before. Sure enough, the grim began to leak. Noxious black smoke spilled forth from those fiery fractures and resolved itself into the face and familiar shape of evil itself. No, he realized, maybe not quite the same. Selim had let her hair down since she'd seen her last, and that was undoubtedly armor he glimpsed on her shoulders. The rest was murky in the haze, but there could be no mistaking what he'd seen. She was girding herself for war, had to be, and yet when she saw him, that stony countenance bloomed in a smile. It proved a startling contrast, and for once he didn't know what to make of it. She seemed genuinely happy to see him. Could someone with so much with a black heart smile like that? And then she spoke. Hello, deceiver. Icy's fingers ran the length of Naruto's spine. Salem, his brow furrowed. Why are you calling me that? Why ever not? A pale brow quirked as she regarded him. Is that not what you are? You have pulled the wool over the collective eyes of Vel, made them believe you are their god. Her spectre clamps thrice, a sound tiny and hollow over the distance. Well done. I'm almost impressed by your ambition. Whatever will you do next? He shook his head and bit off a retort. You know I'm not a god. Dear boy, of course I know. She rolled a palm to her mouth to conceal a smile. There have only ever been 2 of those, and however powerful you may be, you are not one of them. Well, that was surprising. Almost felt nice to be recognized for what he was. No one else seems to believe me. Why would they? Musical laughter swelled through the air. They are sheep. It suits them to think of you as a god. So a god you are, at least in their eyes. His lips pursed. Still, deceiver. Really? Really? That smug smile became coy. You have seen me twice now and lived to tell the tale. Only one other can boast of such a privilege. Curiosity reared its ugly head. And who might that be? Her eyes narrowed. Not here. We can speak more in private. Meet me at these coordinates. Her fingers trailed through the air, carving a destination for him in a shroud of shadow. The time for our battle is at hand. I trust you can find the way. Those unholy orbs drifted to the weary little bird, still sprawled out on the stone floor. You may keep the bird if it suits you. She is young, and I have no need of her. She'd serve as a decent messenger. Her eyes met his. Help them. Come to me. Let us settle this. With a rattling hiss, the seer settled before him. Naruto watched it crumble with a sigh. Like so much ash in the wind, right? and meet with a dark goddess and convince her to give up her evil ways. He could do that, surely, definitely, no problem. Nope, none at all. The beginning of a migraine began to twitch at the back of his skull, causing him to pinch the brow of his nose. For once in his life, Kerman was strangely silent. He never felt more alone than he had in this moment. Damn it, he just wanted to rest. 10 arms engulfed him from behind, still warm. Is it that time already? It was. They both knew it now. Naruto leaned back into Maria's embrace. I'm sorry, he muttered. I have to go. I made a promise. You come back to me, you hear? She kissed the back of his head softly. I don't care what it takes. Do it. Her hands turned him around, and her lips sought his in a brief kiss, anxious and hungry. You meet with her, talk to her, beat her, whatever, and then you come straight back here, all right? He grinned. Whatever it takes. That implies a lot of things. She pressed her head against his chest. Whatever it takes. You made a good life here, Sakura. Not so long ago, those words would have made her come undone. She would have preened and squealed like a giddy fangirl, blushed and spouted no end of senseless gibberish. Now, she only stirred a faint warmth in her chest. How quaint. You think so? Sakura bent down to retrieve the last of her underwear, smirking but a little as she gave her lover a fine view. I thought that was obvious. I mean it. Sasuke's voice followed her. You've done great work here. Why do I get the feeling you're fishing for a favor? She didn't need his approval to exist, to do anything at all. It was nice to be sure, but she no longer clung to it for dear life. I've grown up. It was a humbling realization, one that briefly caused her to miss a step as she retrieved her clothing. She had responsibilities now, duties to both herself and the island of Menagerie. Well, not an island for too much longer. Soon it would be a continent all its own. Sasuke might be able to help with that. Maybe not. Regardless, her plans would continue without him. Even now, she felt the weight of his regard as she moved, keenly aware of his eyes following her as she walked about the room. She put a little extra swing in her hips and was rewarded with the put upon sight. Must you do that? Yes, she grinned as she donned her dress. We must. Stop referring to yourself in the third person. You sound childish. We dislike your tone, knave. She smiled a little. You should show us the proper respect. Apollo smacked her in the arse. Huh, he wanted her. Cha, a tiny and vindictive part of her cried. Eat it. I win. If he wanted to go another round, he would have to come to her to ask. She was no whore to be taken as he pleased. She'd made that very clear. This was a different kind of power altogether. He wanted her. He needed her. Followed her with his eyes as he did no one else. It was heady, intoxicating, not at all like the maiden's gift. She'd need to be careful lest she lose herself in it. So, she said, apropos of nothing, kids, why do you have them? You never all answered my question. Finally come to that, have we? Sasuke had the good grace to grimace. It was a testament to how far he'd come. Once he would have answered with little more than a grunt, or a single word, that he was willing to express himself at all in her presence, let alone be intimate with her, told a tale all its own. She was grateful for that. His secrets, not so much. They're not mine by blood. His voice broke the silence at last. I adopted them. Oh, she feigned disinterest. So you mean you didn't? No. She held up her hair and allowed him to braid it. I thought you and Scathach might have been. Sakura, stop. A hand rose for scaling an argument. And what about you? What about me? She bridled a little and pulled away from him. The last Uchiha sat up and fetched his trousers. I couldn't help but notice you still have 3 dykes running around. Was that the ghost of a smile touching his lips? It was. We haven't been apart that long. His shirt slid over his head, briefly obscuring his matchless eyes from view. Didn't take you for the sentimental sort. Her narrowed eyes burst into verdant emerald flames. And I meant no offense. It was merely a statement. They're mine. What of it? Sakura folded both arms beneath her bare breasts. I took them under my wing and promised them protection. Now who's being cheeky? I heard the girl call you mother. Still you. They've behaved, I assure you. A distinct crash put pad to that signature statement. Take that back, Tyrion's voice shrilled through the wall. Raven's own words squealed right back at him. You first, poison breath. Never, came the cry. My goddess could kill your false god with both arms tied behind her back. Ha, is that all? Mine could slaughter you, that wench, just by looking at her. A slow heat crawled up the back of Sakura's neck. She twitched. Wench was she? Sassy little thing, aren't they? Right then. Sasuke stood with a sigh. We best nip that in the bud lest they get ideas. He was only just climbing to his feet when an explosion rocketed their world. Naruto saw Salem's tower in the distance and smiled. All right, let's reach that horizon. And he ran. Previews. Finally, we meet at last. How I have longed for this moment. Wow, didn't expect that. I am almost flattered. Soon you'll be kneeling. Right. He cracked his knuckles and turned his head from side to side, producing a horrid crack. I'm going to pull you out of that darkness one way or another. Fool, I cannot be saved. It's never too late to be saved. Then he moved. Salem snapped down, alarmed to find him right up in her face. I'll bet this is the first time you took an attack head on like this. He grinned, forehead pressed to hers. Hope you savor it. Now clench your teeth. Then his Rasengan hit hot and hard. Sasuke's feet tightened around their throat. Who do you serve? His victim only laughed. The new order. Demons run when a good man goes to war. In certain extreme situations, the law is inadequate. In order to shame its inadequacy, it is necessary to act outside the law, to pursue natural justice. This is not above revenge. Revenge is not a justification. It is an emotional response. No, not revenge. Punishment. End of chapter 9.